need that, that's important. Just as a friendly reminder, if anybody wasn't here when I made the announcement, I do apologise. We should have been joined for this panel by Mr. Andy Cousins, but due to unforeseen circumstances, he can't be here tonight. So, when I said that, this beautiful man over here went, "Can I help?" And I was like, yes, you can. So, a round of applause for Chris, please.
I think I'm a bit of a poor replacement, but Dave's going to be able to recount the stories Andy told him about this work, and I'll just provide context where I can, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, because
I can be standing over here very quietly. We'll see how it goes.
Context is king. So a little bit about this panel. So who was here last year? So did anybody go to Andy Cousins' panel last year? Yeah. Prior to last year, did anybody know who Andy Cousins was? No. Okay, so for those that weren't here last year, Andy Cousins worked for Hasbro during the late 80s and early 90s, and as a result was on the Boyd Brands team, as it was known back then, and he helped design a lot of the toys that would hit shelves. And he shared a lot of these designs with us. And the plan was to talk through some of these designs, which we will do, but as Chris says, we're very poor replacements for the stories he would be able to tell us. Around that time frame, sort of late 80s, early 90s, Transformers was in a bit of a weird place. Chris, I don't know if you could speak to, just give people a little context for kind of the era that these toys were coming out.
Yeah, whenever history gets compressed down, you forget how obscure in the grand sweep of things this little period of history we're talking about is. Like in America, Transformers ended after 1990 with the Action Masters, but it kept trundling along in Europe and in Japan with new toys coming out, and Hasbro Europe, excuse me, oh boy, it's only Friday night and the voice is already starting to crack. Hasbro Europe were developing their own products for Transformers, 91, 92, yeah, and 93, right up until Generation 2 launched, including new Action Masters. They continued in the spirit of where the American series left off with new Action Masters. Then they kept going, getting crazier, colors kept getting brighter, gimmicks became bigger and crazier, and that's some of the stuff we're going to see here.
Yeah, so it's kind of weird, you know, I have a vivid memory in my head of walking into C&A. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember what that shop is. And there, and I remember this clearly, there on the shelf was an Overlord.
Oh, no, never saw
it. And I'm like, well, I've never heard of that before. That's not proper Transformers, you know. But that was kind of the weird stuff that we got. So we're going to take a look at some of the designs that worked, and then at the end of the panel, we're going to unveil what's under this sheet.
Ooh, I don't know what's under the sheet.
Yeah, well, hey, something Chris McFeely doesn't know. Okay, so let's have a look then.
Wasn't told about the sheet.
Oh, the sheet, yeah. I was going to say, I'm sure you do know. I don't. Anybody know this character?
Stalker.
Yes, you might notice a theme about what's actually in these cabinets. Because part of the reason that we have these particular toys on display is because these are some of the toys that Andy worked on. And here is some of the design work that he would do. Now, let's be clear here. These toys have already been designed, all right? They've been designed in Japan by Takara, and the designs would be shipped over to the UK, or Hasbro in general, and specifically the UK because this was really the only market where these toys were going to be sold, in order to make them more palatable to the European market, for example. So this is why you might see a character in Japan, the same toy has a vastly different colour scheme to what it would have in the UK. Because we were very much, if anybody wasn't around in the early 90s, we were loving our vibrant colours at the time.
Greens and pinks and blues. I'm trying to remember if Stalker got released in Japan. And I can't. off the top of my head.
Well, there we go. So basically what...
I don't think it was Operation Combination. They did do the small Predator jets and the small Turbomaster cars, but the bigger guys I don't think made it out in Japan.
So it's entirely possible, as you say, Chris, like this toy doesn't get released, but it has been made. For whatever reason, there might have been a situation that it doesn't get released. They still have the mold, they've still done the design work, so let's go ahead and at least ship it to somewhere where Transformers are actually still viable, which was the European markets, because we are the best Transformers fans.
Yay! As true today as it was then.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what Emily's told me about this is, you know, what he would get is he would get the design and then he would mess around with it. Now you can't mess around with it too much because, as you all know, you mess around with a Transformer too much, it doesn't transform properly. You know, parts don't fit together and things like that. But I think it's fair to say, and I don't know if you could speak to this a little bit, Chris, but there's definitely a different philosophy for how characters are released in Japan versus how they're released in the rest of the world. What I'm thinking specifically is they really like their hero characters.
I've always wondered how anecdotal that is, but yeah, that's the line you always hear repeated, is that they really love the hero characters in Japan, and villains don't sell as well there. But I mean, this guy was a villain and he wasn't released there, but then a lot of the big guys from this year, if I'm remembering correctly, Rotor Storm didn't come out over there, they just went for the small guys. But then that was 1992 Operation Combination, so literally every other toy except the small Predator jets that came out in Japan that year were all Autobot Micromasters. So there were very few villains released in Japan that year, at least, definitely.
And that's something that we see even up to today. You know, anybody who collects the Masterpiece line, how many Autobots do you have versus how many Decepticons? That on Starscream again, or Megatron again.
Oh, go back one second. I just loved it. I was just reading these little, I couldn't see these notes when we looked at the slides earlier, so I'm leaning in to read them now that it's pulling up. I like this little one here. It says, should we review if screws, the visible screws on the front of the arms here, could be on reverse, like to improve the profile of the toy, the view of the toy from the front, to move the screws to the back. I just think it's interesting to see that sort of consideration going into the design.
Yeah, and speaking to Andy, you know, these are the kind of small changes that he can make. You know, as I say, can't really reinvent the wheel, but can do something to make it look cooler. And cooler and more 90s is a theme that you will see going along through these slides. Another thing that he would do, again, that I mentioned, was have a look at the color schemes. So we all know what Stalker ended up looking like, but here were 3 alternative color schemes for Stalker. Now, I will save what Andy told me about his method when it came to coloring a Transformer for later, because I think it's more relevant. But I think it's clear to see that back when these toys were coming out, nothing was off the table. You know, there was no love or care or thought to, I should rephrase that, that's a terrible way to say it. There was no, this was product, and Andy has used that word many, many times. This was 100% product. All he had to do was figure out a way to sell this to as many people as possible. And so, you know, thinking about the color scheme, things like that. Nowadays, you know, if somebody from Takara designed a new Bumblebee toy and sent it to somebody in Hasbro UK and said, come up with a different, you know, make this palatable to your market, do you think they would change him from any other color than yellow? You know, no, it's not going to happen. But back then, because nobody knew who Stalker was, absolutely go for it.
That's this. Oh, I was just going to say, this one down here in the bottom right is obviously the finalized colors, but this one over here reminds me. Well, those are the finalized colors. I remember the Sky Quakey actually. Actually, come think of another look closer at it. It's a bit more Sky Quakey in its colors. This one over here reminds me of the G2 Rotor Force, the dark purple and the dark greens. And this one looks like. Well, I think we'll see the character this color scheme reminds me of later in these slides, actually, which makes me wonder if they had like certain. Well, you know, we're talking more about the colors as we go along, but bright colors were a big theme of the era. It was the 90s, the era of yikes pencils and heat reactive t-shirts.
Did anybody have a heat reactive t-shirt in the audience? Yeah, they were great. If anybody doesn't know what a heat reactive t-shirt is, it is exactly what it says. It is a t-shirt that changes color when it heats up. So all you had was a bunch of teenage boys going, look! Anyway, right, moving on. He's the greatest Autobot of all time, according to James Roberts. Thunder Clash. I'm sure everybody knows this toy. You've seen the prototype. Andy, when I said Andy made some changes to this guy, I'm not kidding either. These are Andy's original concept drawings for Thunder Clash. So, the original toy got sent to him, and he looked at it, and he was like, I don't like the look of that. Now, I'm not going to blow your mind. As I said, these are slight changes. These aren't things that he could have, completely reinvented. But, see this picture on the left-hand side? That was Andy's original sketch of what the toy originally looked like. Yeah, and he said that the reason he wanted to change it was because it looked too much like Postman Pat. And you can see what he's done. He's elongated the card at the bottom. He's made everything more angular, a bit more angry, a bit more menacing.
Yeah, as he describes here, so he wants on the previous slide as well, he wants the top of the truck to form a brow, to literally make the windscreen look like angry eyes.
Yeah.
So, even though, and we were talking about this a little earlier when we were cobbling together what we were going to talk about. As you'll notice, if we go back a couple of Thunder Clash, notice that he shares a lot in common with other truck-based Transformers. What is Optimus Prime's primary color? Red. What is Ultra Magnus's color scheme? Red, white, and blue. Red, white, and blue.
But with the saturation cranked up for the 90s, and they changed it around. Like he's got white cab, which Ultra Magnus has too. What I mean is the colors are in different places. That's what you might expect, but they've got that. They've got that bright pink plastic. Because this was 92, so this was, if I'm remembering right, this was the first year of light piping. The Turbo Masters, that's Thunder Clash was the big leader Turbo Master. There was Rotostorm, the helicopter, and 4 small Turbo Master cars. And the Predators, the Stalker, and a collection of Decepticon jets, they all had light piped eyes, and the Autobots had these screaming hot pink translucent plastic, and the Decepticons all had that sickly 90s toxic turtle ooze green for their eyes.
So it's really fascinating to think, that, as you say, this is the leader character. So what does he represent? And of course, if you're thinking about Optimus Prime, and you're thinking about Ultra Magnus, you're not thinking about menacing truck barreling towards you. You're thinking of Postman Pat.
Aggressive.
But no, Andy wanted to go in a different direction because the 90s had attitude.
Yeah. Sonic the Hedgehog and other great heroes of the era.
He's not even kidding about that either. Genuine.
He's my friend. He's real.
Yeah. So again, some of these are just some of his original sketches. And what Andy told me, which is so fascinating, is, and he would have told you this had he been able to get here. But, his job was just to draw and draw and draw, and that's what he would do. It's just stream of consciousness, but also he's in a position where he has to sell this product. He has to give it to marketing. And he has the forethought to think, it's the 90s, it's not going to sell looking like Postman Pat, it's going to have to be aggressive.
What's that note up there in the top left?
Field cab is a little passive. Can we add some aggression? Seat roughs.
You really would can we add some aggression? Aggressive. Well, this one, passive. He's written on it, like the aggression He was really going. He was very clear about what he wanted here.
Yeah, he was not after a happy-go-lucky Optimus Prime dad type here. I like that last one. Good brow. So here, this is another one that we've got here. Again, passive. Instant aggression.
I like this one that he's written down here. Postman!
And he's had this stuff sitting in his...
Oh, sorry, I just realized why it says Postman. Look at the shape of this. It looks like, this one literally now looks like Postman's pants cap, doesn't it? The way he's changed the round of the truck.
Also, yeah.
It looks like a postman's...
Oh.
Serious pee-pop.
Right, okay, moving on then. Oh, everybody know who this is? Skyquake, absolutely. Somebody who, many years ago, I did an interview with Nick Roche, just before Last Stand of the Wreckers hit. And I asked him, go on, tell me one person who's going to be in it. And he went, Skyquake, and I got really excited. Because it's Nick Roche.
How many pages in is it that he died?
4 or something like that, and that's probably being generous. But yeah, I loved this toy as a kid. And we're going to talk a little bit about gimmicks in just a second. But let's take a look at some of the designs here. Now, one of the things that Andy, it's not just enough that Andy is able to draw different things. It's another thing entirely that he's able to engineer this stuff. Now, unfortunately, I don't know whether or not this toy had the gimmicks that it did when Andy received it, and whether or not Andy was actually the one that put these designs together. Chris, can you talk a little bit about what the play pattern of the toy actually was?
Yeah, the shared theme of the Predators and the Turbo Masters was that they fired missiles, because Transformers hadn't fired missiles before. The original Diaclones fired missiles, but Hasbro US took out all the springs from the launchers when they brought them over. There's that line that was repeated in so many of the instruction books: propulsion will be weak, if at all. But apparently once those wussy Americans were out of the picture, the Europeans were able to get firing missiles back in the toys again. I joke, but there was this very American case of...
We've got a bit of reverb?
Is it a bit of reverb?
We've got a bit of reverb?
Am I standing too close to that?
That's bad.
Yeah. There was this case, where a kid in America did sadly choke on a missile, and that's why that law, the length of missiles, that's why reissue Seekers missiles are all the lengths they are now. I remember years later, after I'd re-entered Transformers fandom in the late 90s and early 2000s, looking back upon the Turbo Masters. I had a snare. That was the one, like the one toy from this era I had. He was one of the Predator jets, and I didn't even have him anymore, but it was one of his missiles, just in a little box in a corner. And I remember llooking back on the missiles for that long, and I was like, how did we ever actually allow this? This is not safe.
So yeah, here it is. This is a lot more in depth, as you can see, because
it's cipher, aren't they?
Yeah, it's showing part of the transformation sequence. It's showing the gimmicks. It's showing how bits pop in and possibly come off. It's truly fascinating. But again, it's all he's thinking about the physical design of the toy. And that is the skill, it's the engineering part of his brain that is able to do this. We talk about Transformers as action figures, or puzzles, or whatever it is. But really, the people that are designing these things are engineers, not just the fantastic stuff that you see from Robocen, where it obviously takes mechanical engineers and things like that, but to actually create these things, it requires a certain clarity of thought that I certainly don't possess.
It's just, I got in everyone's way there for a second as I leaned in to read the notes, but I see this note here reads, overall, this development looks complicated, is what the note reads. I'm not entirely sure what it is meant to be shown, because like Skyquake had a couple of gimmicks in the end. He, in addition to a firing missile, he had these chambers in his wings where you rotated them and the bombs just dropped out like a carpet bombing gimmick. And but I can't really see.
I do wonder.
That in any of these.
I do wonder, looking at this, whether or not this piece is supposed to eject off and drop this bomb or something like that. I mean, I have asked Andy these questions, but for him, you know, it was a job 30 years ago, and you know, he's
like
worked on
this bit up here. Be careful here. This bit here seems to be the fuselage, the rear engine of Skyquake, because that was the other big gimmick that he had. Was the Turbomasters, the Autobots, only had the firing missiles. The Predators had the Mega Visor gimmick, where Stalker and Skyquake had these slots. Stalker had a slot in the top of that big shoulder cannon, and Skyquake had one in his rear fuselage, and all the little Predator jets could plug into that hole, and they had these slides, these like Viewmaster slides built into the base of the figure. You plugged it in, it flipped down, and then you could peer through the rear of the missile or the engine to see magnified the image on the slide. But again, I'm not like, I see the hole, the divot where they clipped, but I don't see any spelling out of the details. It makes me wonder when that came in exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, all of this, I love this because it's so fascinating to try and unpick this 30-year puzzle. And yeah, it has been 30 years. That's the terrifying thing about it. Right. Again, just a few design concepts here. This is for the Aquaspeeders, which you can see over there. And you know, again, this is most likely something very simple, straightforward. These toys are already designed. Can we, you know, put a gimmick in, or is this a gun or something like that? Color scheme. You know, these don't look like they're anything that are being changed particularly.
I've always had trouble telling these guys apart, if I'm brutally honest. They have a
Do we have any Aquaspeeder fans in the room?
That one guy! No, these guys, this moves us on from 92 to 93. The Turbomasters Predators, they were, okay, I'm definitely reverbing, haven't I?
Yeah. Hey, you're all right there.
They were 92, and these guys were 93. So there were actually 4 Aquaspeeders, and 4 Aquaspeeder Autobots, and 4 Stormtrooper Decepticons. And I think, now, I'm not even going to guess, I can't tell. Without the colours, I can't tell which one's which. I think that one's Deluge, or is he Aquafend? I could get their names, I just couldn't match them to the characters. But they had a funny history because they came out in 93 in Europe, and 93 was also the year that G2 started in America. So while Europe was still plowing ahead with its own original molds that year, in America they made G2 largely by reissuing old G1 toys, but they did bring the 4 Autobot Aquaspeeders over, except they cut them in half, they made 2 of them Autobots and 2 of them Decepticons, and they changed all their names, but they reused some of the names from the European market, but none of them had the same name as they had in the European market. So is it any wonder I can't tell which of them is which?
And again, this is it. It's product at the end of the day. You know, for the one Aquaspeeder fan in the audience who probably can tell you who everyone is, at the end of the day...
Does anyone feel brave enough if we go left to right to identify these? No.
No. Even the one Aquaspeeder fan, is it? Oh, go on.
I'm saying even I can't.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. There are some puzzles that are just impossible to answer.
Just before we move on, I should say, of course, they're called the Aquaspeeders because the deal with these toys was that they squirted water. You can see, I think this is supposed to be an illustration of the pumping bellows that were attached to all. Oh, yeah, here's a better look at it in this one over here. You can see this little concertina is the bellows that squirted water, and when they had color-changing plastic, so when they were hit with warm water, they would change color because, well, we were talking about the t-shirts already. It was the 90s.
Yeah, absolutely.
What we're into.
And you know, it's kind of weird because you can sort of plot the... You will no doubt correct me if I'm wrong here, but you know, we're living in the era now of gimmick toys, and we have been ever since 1987. Headmasters, Target Masters, Power Masters, then we start getting into color changes, we start getting into firing missiles, we start getting into light piping. All of these gimmicks to try and freshen up a brand, which really isn't doing particularly well at the time. You know, because it doesn't have the marketing behind it. So it's like, okay, what is the style now? It would be interesting to know, and I don't know if anybody can answer this question, as to whether or not these water features were originally intended to be part of this toy line, or whether it was something that was added after the toys were designed. Because I would imagine a chemical change in plastic and or, you know, a spray cannon wouldn't necessarily destroy the mold.
Well, I had one aqua speeder, and it was this guy. If I'm reading this art right, it was this guy in the middle, who again couldn't tell you what his European market name was, but in America he was GoBots. His name was GoBots because they had because Hasbro had bought Tonka like 2 years beforehand, so they needed to reuse that name to secure their trademark on it. And the way he was designed was that his water cannon was fully underslung the vehicle mode. It came up behind, and the front of the gun actually became the front bumper of the car. Lights and the grille and everything. So it probably was there from the start with the intention.
Moving on then. Any fan of Action Masters in the room? Oh, come on! They were great! I think everybody is secretly an Action Master fan.
Very secretly.
Action Masters were a huge deal. Yes, they killed the brand in America, but they did really well over here. And we talked a little bit about colouring, and this is what we were saving towards. These are Andy's original colour samples for some of the Action Masters that he worked on. Now, I'll give you a little anecdote that he told me, which I thought was fantastic, which is that he told me he would deliberately make colour choices for characters that he knew were dreadful. And the reason that he would do that was so that the people that ultimately made the final decision would go, that's terrible, I'll go with that one. Which was the one he wanted them to go with in the first place. So he would literally, you know, figure out what was the best colour scheme in his mind and then make dreadful choices for some of the other ones.
These specific ones, this top left, top right, bottom right, these are the Action Master Elites, the European market exclusive Action Masters that did transform. So this one is the one, there's no names on these, I'm noticing, because there were names on some of the others. So this one that forms this corner is Double Punch, his name is. But he's always clearly been Scorponok or black. He's got kind of a black Zarak-y look. But I think it's interesting because like this version here, this green and purple one is very close to G1 Scorponok colors. And then this guy up here, this black, red, and gold one is very close to black Zarak colors. This is my first time seeing these today. I haven't seen these before. This is just the things I'm noticing. And this one here is this is the color scheme they went with in there. And this Bertie Bassett looking one. And this one over here is. These are from '91, so this is from a year before the Turbo Masters and the Predators, because this guy's name is Turbo Master. But he's clearly Bruticus, and none of these colors really look like Bruticus.
No.
And instead they went, this is the color scheme they went with here, this lilac, purple, and magenta mashup, which is very like one of those other earlier color concepts we saw for stuff.
Yeah, and we've no idea whether or not, you know, there's a variety of colours that they're able to use or anything like that, or whether they're limited in the palettes that they can. I would assume that, you know, there are certain restrictions in regards to because again, everything comes down to cost. the amount of paint apps that you're able to put on any given toy. Okay, let's have a look at the next one. These, again, are his original concepts for some of the Action Masters. Now, these are some characters that you will, I hope, recognize. Like, for example, this lovely burnt orange sideswipe in the top left.
This nice powder blue sideswipe down here.
Tracks, an orange Tracks, a green Bombshell. These are just, again, some of the things that he would do. I mean, look at this, right? Are you telling me that he wanted Tracks to look like this? You know, probably not. And again, it's probably because, I mean, the reason that we have a Tracks up in the top left there that looks like Tracks is probably because at the time, Andy has gone back, seen what colour the original Generation 1 toy was, and perhaps tried to create some kind of consistency. And that's actually quite a rare thing, probably, for somebody who's joining the line 5 years after the toy's been taken off shelves.
Tracks, yeah, 5 years. Yeah. I think it's interesting, though, the way these are spread out, because, you know, I guess he would have handed each of these individual sheets in separately, and none of all the different colours, like none of them are all on one sheet. If he was genuinely making that play where he had ones he specifically wanted, he's been very careful to space them out across all the different sheets. Like, so like up here, this is Tracks' final colours, but these two don't have them. Then down here, this fella's name is Takeoff. He's an original character for the 91 Action Masters. That's his final colours. Here's Bombshell's final colours. This is Charger. That's his final colours. No, I guess that is Bombshell's final colours. He has kind of a more powdery purple on the Action Master, but that one's very close to that in general. This is Sideswipe, of course, is red. And this other guy is Power Flash, who some more than meets the eye Lost Light readers might recognise. And that's his final colours. And this one here is nothing at all from the final look, but he's really spread out.
So it's so fascinating to see all of this, and again, you know, really want to give a big thank you to Andy for letting us take a look at this stuff, because, you know, it's been sitting in his garage for 30 years, and, you know, we're the ones that are like, go on, let us bring them out. And, you know, he's got so much more. I mean, he's worked on probably, you know, he worked on Batman, he worked on Action Force, you know, a lot of these lines that we're familiar with, and it's just great to see this time capsule being preserved, so it's great. And I know that he is, you know, devastated that he's not here to talk about it with you, but hopefully we've given you a little bit of insight into perhaps some of the thought process, and we've given you something that you've never seen before.
And you can see various prototypes and engineering samples of Stalker, Carded Active Speeder, and Stormtrooper figures from all around Europe, various card variations, all here from the Mapes' collection in the cabinets on either side.
Yeah, and if you're interested where the Mapes got some of this stuff from, Andy Cousins. Many years ago, because again, they were ahead of the game before we even knew the game was being played. Right, now then, I promised you all a little bit of a treat, and I'm a man of my word. When we saw all of this stuff, we were inspired. Mr. Andrew Turnbull, do you want to come to the stage, please? A round of applause.
Hello. So, as often happens, and just to preface, it was Andy who reached out to us last year because he was so overwhelmed with the reaction he had from the audience. I'm going to look through, I think I've got more. Would you like to have me back next year? At which point we said, yes, absolutely, come along, what have you got? So he sent us a smattering of some of these images, just to give us a flavour for what he was going to come along with, and there is other stuff, sadly, that he wouldn't be able to show, we won't be able to show because we don't have it. And Dave sent me a copy, he goes, we're doing this panel, can we do something with this? And I went, I'll think about it. And I went, I can't do anything, but is anyone familiar with Matt Marshall from Toy Fu at all, and his prodigious custom work? Anyone pick up one of his custom Action Masters last year, or any of the various charity auctions? Well, I asked Matt, do you have a window in your schedule, and could you maybe work up maybe 3 of these? One for a charity auction, one to give to Andy, and one for Toy Fu? And he said, I'll see what I can do. So, I'm getting this in now before he tries to lie about what he's actually done. But if I can ask Matt to come to the stage, if you grab a mic, because I'm going to let him talk about it and show off.
Shall we show it now?
Well,
yeah, because we're going to unveil it, but I'll show it so you don't have to get out of your seat.
So, can I say, a few months ago, Andy said to me, Matt, I've got these designs, can you make at least 2 of each? And I said no.
I said 3.
He said 3, yeah. So I didn't have a bombshell, unfortunately, but I did have the originals of everybody else. So what I've done is I've created customs of each of those designs. So I've got 10 customs here, matching the colour schemes, and the grey rose is like a grey prototype. These are the originals. And these are the best as I can match it, the colours on Andy Cousins' sheets.
So, and you can see them up here, they're all on display. You know, at TF Nation, we're not really greedy and we don't try and keep too much to ourselves, so is there a way that any enterprising young or elderly member of the audience could get their hands on one of these fine items?
Yes, right, so these customs, they're all handmade, so I've actually resin cast them using very traditional methods. So I've got took the originals apart, vacuum chambered them with silicone, stuck them in a pressure pot, painted them up. They've got the proper T-bars and O-rings. I had to modify the hips so they don't go outwards, but they do move up. But they're very much art, they're not toys.
He makes it sound so easy, eh?
These are all unique, one-of-a-kind pieces. I will never do one of these in those colours ever again.
Unless you match his price.
Yeah, well, so what we're doing is, so 2 of these will be auctioned by TFN on this Saturday and Sunday.
Saturday and Saturday.
But
Saturday and Saturday.
Saturday.
Yes.
Even better. And the others half of them will be sold by Toy Fu on the Sunday, and the other half will be going on to auction or sale later in the year. And that will all be in aid of charity. The charity we're supporting, and so I'm with Toy Fu, and this is where the money from these is going to a charity called Mary's Meals. And what they do is they supply school meals to children in some of the world's poorest countries, so they don't have to choose between going to school and eating. So that's where the money from these customs are going, and they are absolutely one-of-a-kind, unique pieces. We will be leaving these in a
We'll find space in one of the cabinets for them, so you can see them.
Yeah, so tomorrow you'll be able to just take a look at them, and then Saturday and Sunday you'll be able to buy some of them, and then later in the year we'll put the rest up for sale.
So for any of you who have partners or even others who don't like you spending too much money on toys, you're not spending money on toys, you're making a charitable donation. You just happen to get a free gift along with it. It's not a pen, it's something slightly better. So,
I think that all deserves a big round of applause, doesn't it, really? Brilliant. So, yes, as mentioned there by Matt and Andy, we'll be doing the charity auctions tomorrow, where we are going to pick them. We've actually now got to decide which one of these fine items to actually auction off. But again, some of them will be available at Toy Fu as well. And so if you turned around and said, Action Masters, no. Art. That's the way I would look at it. Right, I think we've run out of time. Thank you all so very much. I really do appreciate it. I really want to thank Chris for stepping up to the plate and offering his assistance, to Andy and Matt as well for giving me a helping hand in unveiling all of this. And a big thanks to all of you as well for happily listening to us drivel on for 40 minutes guessing at pretty pictures. So, round of applause for everybody. Thank you. Right, so we've got about 15 minutes and then we're going to conclude tonight's festivities with Am I overselling it by calling it the greatest animated movie of all time? That's a yes, you've just said yes. I said, am I overselling it? No, it's the answer. So we'll be putting Transformers the movie on very shortly for you to enjoy it because, let's be honest, there is nothing better than watching at least the first 20 minutes of Transformers the movie with a bunch of Transformers fans. Yeah? See you very shortly. Thank you. Bye-bye.